Hi, everybody. Welcome. We are all here. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Corliss.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Morales. Nash.
Here.
Stead.
Here.
Willett. 4 present, 2 absent.
Thank you. First up, we've got Alicia McAndrews and Eric Vilmoria here to provide the first FY 2025 Q1 report. And Eric, are you going to introduce Alicia? It is great to have you with us, Alicia. This is Alicia's first presentation before council. We're so glad to have you with us here at the City of Boise. Eric, go ahead and make the introduction, but welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, members of the council. We are very happy to be here today to present the first quarterly report for fiscal year 25. I'm actually, as you mentioned, I'm going to step aside in just a quick second here as our new budget manager, Alicia, is going to be presenting today. Alicia comes to the city with many years of governmental budgeting experience, and we're very lucky to have her. So with that as an introduction, I'll hand it over to Alicia.
Right. Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Alicia McAndrews, and I'll be presenting the quarterly report for the first quarter of the fiscal year 2025, which is included in your packets. I'll provide a high-level financial overview. However, more detailed financial information can be found on the city's open book. We have revenue, spending, and staffing information there, and it's linked on the finance department's website. So to begin, and as a reminder, the first quarter of the fiscal year covers the months of October through December of 2024. And the primary takeaway from the report is that the city closed out the fiscal year, having general fund revenues and expenditures generally within the expected ranges. Now speaking to general fund revenues specifically, they are in line with what we've seen for collections from prior years. General fund revenues are not received uniformly for months from month to month during the year. So as you can see in the table here, the city has not yet received property taxes, sales tax, or liquor taxes. But we do expect to see those in the second quarter of the fiscal year. But given these timing considerations, we do expect that the revenues will close out the year within expected budget. That is with the exception of the liquor tax. Based on recent trends, we do anticipate that there is going to be a reduction in liquor revenue. However, we will come back to you with the Q2 report with more information on the liquor tax revenue. Turning to general fund expenditures, these also are within the anticipated range after the first quarter of the fiscal year. Personnel expenses were slightly underspent compared to par level based on calendar days due to vacancies, but this underspend was partially offset by one-time compensation and overtime. We did see improvement in the vacancy rate in Q1 of 2025 relative to 2024, with the average vacancy rate for the quarter at 6.9%, which is lower than the 10.75% the same quarter that we had the year before. And taking a look at maintenance and operation accounts, that spending also fell within the expected range for the first quarter of the fiscal year. On this slide, we show how Boise's unemployment rates compared to Ada County, the Boise Metropolitan Statistical Area, the state of Idaho, and the US in each month of the first quarter of the fiscal year. So as you see in the light blue, the city compares favorably, with the lowest unemployment rate hovering between 3.1% and 3.3%. So this is the last slide on the report here. The economy remains stable in Boise, and this is supported by employment, which is up over 5%, or 7,000 jobs in calendar year 2024 relative to 2023. And airport passenger traffic, which saw an additional 81,000 passengers in the first quarter of fiscal year 2025 as compared to the same quarter in fiscal year 2024. So these indicators are tempered by other economic indicators such as inflation, which is up slightly, and decreasing consumer confidence. So just to wrap up, after the first quarter of 2025, we project the city's general fund revenues and expenditures to end the fiscal year generally within budgeted levels. But we will be back with any changes to report to you after quarter two. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Madam Mayor.
Sure.
Alicia, thank you so much for this presentation. I like the way it was laid out. It was very easy to follow, and I appreciate all the information to show that we're on track, and especially our economic indicators for unemployment. That's great to see where Boise is at compared to other cities. I had one quick question, and that was on the first slide in regards to our internal charges. If you can just walk us through what are internal charges, and do we see any concerns being at 28.2%? Thank you.
Absolutely. I can step aside, Eric. Will give a answer.
Madam Mayor, members of council, internal charges is largely comprised of our cost allocation plan, so our indirect overhead plan. So reimbursements to the general fund from our enterprise funds for services provided on their behalf. You can see that it's just slightly over the par level of 28.2%. That's largely attributable to one-time pay that went out in the first quarter, and we expect that to moderate over the rest of the year.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Miss McAndrews, just wanted to say thank you, welcome. We're all super excited to have you here. I'm sure Eric is especially excited to have you here as well. So welcome to the city of Boise. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for the actual report itself. 41 pages is pretty digestible, I think, for both us as city council members, but also for the community that wants to look at this a little bit more. I'm wondering if you could speak to, I was joking around about this earlier about how much we talk about the liquor tax on council and how that wasn't something I ever thought that we would do. But I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit more towards some of those trends that you were mentioning.
Sure. Madam Mayor, members of the council. Yeah, we have seen declines within our liquor tax collections. In our conversations with the state, they're seeing this across the whole state, really, changing consumption patterns. Liquor tax is not all alcohol sales. Liquor tax is sales that go through state liquor stores. So beer and wine are not included within that. And we've just seen changing consumption patterns really across the industry and across the state. We are very much monitoring this activity. We would expect to bring a reduction as part of the fiscal year 26 budget build, recognizing this changing behavior.
And Madam Mayor, just kind of following up with that, I think that in the report, you maybe even gave us some predictions of what we might anticipate at the end of the year. Can you talk to that just a little bit more?
Sure. Madam Mayor, members of council, we receive quarterly payments from the state and then a one-time true-up at the end of the year. There's been indications that in totality, we might be, as much as $500,000 to $600,000 below budget within that category.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think it's nice to, it's just a prediction, so we never really know, but it's nice to have an idea of like what that total snapshot might be looking like and where that might mean either adjusting or evaluating where the 2026 budget, like you said, may land going forward. So again, thanks for the report. Thanks for the presentation, and again, welcome.
Thank you both. And next up, we have Nikki Hellenkamp, with an overview of the tiny home pilot. Nikki, I met your uncle today at a chamber lunch.
All right. Hi, everyone. Mayor, members of council. For the record, Nikki Olivier Hellenkamp, not my uncle, here today with an update on the Tiny Home on Wheels pilot. I'm joined by Jeff Lowe, Senior Planner with our Planning and Development Services Department, and Kyle Patterson of the Department of Organizational Effectiveness. As discussed during last week's strategic planning session, staff is requesting direction about whether to move a code change related to tiny homes on wheels forward with the late March submittal of year one zoning code improvements, and to capture any initial feedback you might have. I'm wanting to provide a little bit of more of a deep dive on the tiny home on wheels pilot and the results that we've seen thus far to help inform that conversation. So just for background, in 2023, the city of Boise began a pilot program to temporarily allow movable tiny homes, also known as tiny homes on wheels, or THOs, if you're really in the know, in backyards for use as long-term rentals. Tiny homes on wheels are structures that are under 400 square feet, located on a trailer and constructed using typical housing materials. The city partnered with Leap Housing to operate the pilot and the Idaho Policy Institute to evaluate it. Permits were issued for participants to site a tiny home on their property for residential use for a period of 12 to 18 months. As you can see here, we had 56 applicants for this program, and of those, 6 pilot sites were selected and were located across the city. We saw 2 in the North End, 2 that were close to Broadway and Boise Avenue, 1 out at Orchard and I-84, and 1 at Maple Grove and McMillan. The pilot did initially contemplate including tiny home village sites, but none were able to participate, so this model has not been evaluated as part of the pilot. In addition, the city of Haley adopted an ordinance in early 2023 that allows tiny homes on wheels within all residential zones, and which has created an opportunity for us to learn from their experience in addition to the pilot here in the city. This is one of the program participants, Marissa, just talking about her decision to participate in the pilot. And she really spoke to the realities of Boise's housing market and her desire to use the property that she had for this purpose so that there was additional housing opportunity for others in her community. So some initial findings from the pilot. The initial findings include that there are no known health and safety challenges thus far, and that the tiny homes on wheels have wintered well. Haley's ordinance, I think it's worth noting, prioritized high building standards to ensure that tiny homes on wheels are a safe and healthy housing option for residents. So with their ordinance, they require that tiny homes on wheels be certified to meet nationally recognized standards set by the American National Standards Institute, National Organization of Alternative Housing, otherwise known as NOAA, to achieve that. We also saw positive outcomes reported by occupants, including lower costs of living, which was really one of the goals of the pilot. Costs to tenants included space fees for those who already owned their tiny homes on wheels of $500 to $650 a month, up to $800 a month in Haley, with the cost of a tiny home itself ranging from about $80,000 to $180,000. Cost to tenants who are renting both the space and the tiny home on wheels itself were approximately $1,070 monthly. And we saw, as you can see, that 5 of the 6 property owners were renting just the space for a tenant who already owned a tiny home themselves. For reference, under federal guidelines, we would consider that cost of $1,070 a month for both the space and the tiny home itself to be affordable for a 2-person household at 60% area median income. So this could certainly be considered a source of naturally occurring affordable housing where it's the size of the unit that's keeping the price down rather than a deed restriction. If you look at just the cost of renting the space, that can conceivably create an affordable option for households at 30% area median income, although of course that's not taking into account the cost of purchasing the home in the first place. In keeping with the goal of creating more housing options for residents, the city of Haley did also choose to restrict tiny homes on wheels for long-term use only, meaning that they need to be rented for 31 or more days at a time. So that was an interesting choice that council made. As you can see here, property owner site costs ranged pretty widely from as low as $1,500 to as much as $11,000. I think it was mainly based on what was already available on site. There were some sites that were kind of already set up in a way that there wasn't as much site prep needed, whereas others were starting more from scratch. And these costs were certainly a barrier to property owner participation.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Nikki, do we have any idea what types of impact fees we would expect to be charged for these types of things?
Madam Mayor, Council President Nash. So under the pilot, we did not charge impact fees to participants. If this were something to be done in the long term, the impact fees that we would expect to charge would be the same as those charged for hotel rooms, so lower than for an ADU, and that's based on square footage. So because of the small square footage, it would be a lower impact fee than what we would charge for ADU development. If you'd like the exact number of how much the impact fee would be, I'm happy to track that down for you.
Do we charge the impact fee for the pad, or do we charge it for the actual installation of the tiny home?
Madam Mayor, Council President Nash, I believe it would be for the permitting of a pad for the purpose of use as a tiny home on wheels, but happy to check on that for you.
Do you have a range of what those fees might be?
I wish I did, but no, not in front of me.
Last one,
Mhm.
how do we, because we do have waivers of impact fees for deed restricted affordability. How do we treat impact fees for naturally occurring affordability?
Madam Mayor, Council President Nash, currently the city is permitted under state law to waive impact fees for deed restricted affordable housing if it makes up those impact fees out of the general fund. So we have to have a source of funding in order to do that. And for naturally occurring affordable housing, that isn't something that's available.
Gotcha.
Currently. Yeah. And I'm happy to follow up with those numbers on what it is that we would anticipate seeing for the tiny homes on wheels.
Madam Mayor.
Yes,
Nikki,
go ahead.
thank you. Nikki, before we move off the site, on the site costs, the owner site costs, does that include things for utility hookup, power, sewer? And then how did they run into any problems? I'm trying to think about for a power cost, or were they throwing out an extension cord? And how did they do for sewer and for water as well?
Madam Mayor, Council
Thank
Member
you.
Corliss. Yeah, I might defer to Jeff Lowe on some of the specifics of how the pilot participants were addressing that. The short answer is yes. The cost for setup certainly included utility costs and site preparing the pad in whatever way that property owner was doing so. But Jeff, do you want to comment on?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Jeff Lowe, Planning and Development Services, council member. So part of the pilot program was trying to work through these challenges, understanding that this was going to be temporary and working with these applicants to get just enough life safety in place to understand how this would work and what would be any consequences or repercussions or advantages. Some of the features that were installed were above ground with freeze protection. Some were just plug in. So that was an interesting thing to work through because our main focus is life safety when it comes to these, as well as impacts on other properties. So trying to work through letting things happen to understand them better. So a lot like the pad sites, some of those were already there, or maybe they put in gravel and compacted it. So I don't know the exact cost of those. It's going to be different for each one depending on location on the site. So I don't know if that helped or.
That does help. Thanks so much, Jeff.
As Jeff just mentioned, the other component that we certainly wanted to take into account is the impact on neighbors. And overall, the feedback from neighbors has been supportive, although there certainly have been concerns raised that are similar to those that are voiced related to ADUs. specifically concerns about parking and the impacts of additional density, or at times a fear that tiny home occupants will bring crime or disorder. We also really saw that site placement was a key component to addressing some neighbor concerns, and staff have been really thoughtful about how to include requirements that seek to address this issue were we to move forward with a code update. And just to Jeff's point, I think one of the interesting things about doing this as a pilot is that there was a lot of learning done about, okay, if this was going to be a permanent thing, what are the things that would need to be in place that maybe we allowed for the pilot and that we wouldn't allow permanently going forward because we saw some of the impacts that it had. So a lot of interesting learning there. So again, the question here that we're seeking direction on today is about whether council would like to see an ordinance presented to you as part of that March submittal of year one improvements that would permanently allow tiny homes on wheels beyond just the pilot. And as staff has looked at the results of the pilot, we have a few proposals for your consideration if this is something you'd like to move forward. One is to largely treat tiny homes on wheels like ADUs with a few additional requirements. One, so tiny homes on wheels being permitted in zones where ADUs are currently allowed, which would be all R zones as well as MX 1, 2, and 3, a requirement that they meet the setbacks required for the zoning district that they're in and be at least 6 feet from all other structures. Only one tiny home on wheels permitted on a property and only as an accessory use to the primary residential use. A requirement that permanent utility connections be in place. So kind of to Jeff's point, less of the garden hoses maybe, but having something that is more permanent and is addressing some of those life safety issues. A question for you all about restricting tiny homes on wheels to long-term use, like the city of Haley did with 31 or more days, a requirement to include high-quality skirting and a flat compacted surface for the trailer to rest on, and the NOAA standard that I mentioned before to address the kind of housing quality issues that sometimes get raised. So again, just an initial skeleton of an update. And what we're seeking today is general direction in terms of, would you like to see this ordinance move forward in the March submittal of year one improvements? And if so, what initial feedback you have about what that ordinance should include.
Madam Mayor. Thank you for this presentation, Nikki. This is great. Long time coming, talking about this for a while, and thanks for everybody that participated in this. I'm strongly supportive of this being in the March stuff. I'd also be interested in exploring incentives around how we mitigate the impacts of the impact fees we charge. We have an idea of what those are that might help me better understand if that is an actual barrier or not, but would be supportive of exploring incentives related to that.
Madam Mayor, Nikki, is this your last slide?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So a couple questions here. One of the things that you noted on one of the previous slides was that the property owner cost is maybe a barrier. And I guess what I'm seeing in this slide is that if we're requiring permanent electrical, water, sewer connections, I see an increased cost there and potentially an increased barrier. I'm wondering if staff has found any opportunities to decrease that barrier, and if you can maybe speak to some of those.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, it's a great question. You really hit the nail on the head. So one of the reasons that the costs mentioned before were certainly a barrier to participation had to do with the fact that this was a pilot program, and people who participated understood that at the end of a year, it was very possible that the thing they just paid for was not going to be an allowable use in the city of Boise anymore. And so there's certainly a financial risk there of saying, okay, well, why would I pay to put in all of these connections or to, compact this gravel pad if in a year the city's going to tell me I'm not allowed to have a tiny home on wheels back here anymore. So there is a trade-off here in terms of, in order to make it make sense for someone to participate in a pilot, you need to understand there's a very real financial risk that they're taking if there isn't going to be a code change made afterwards. If there is a code change and there's that predictability of I'm going to be able to use this in the long term and be able to recoup my investment, that's some of the thinking there, is that there is a return on investment that would be high enough for people in order to recoup those costs so that we can prioritize the health and safety aspect in that way. But I think it is a conversation certainly staff have had, and it makes a lot of sense around balancing that health safety aspect with the affordability aspect and making it something that is accessible and usable for Boise residents.
Great. Yeah, Madam Mayor, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think I don't want to get into the weeds, and I think that there's probably a lot of nuances, but I think of different site locations and how if there's a site location like the one that you showed that's a little bit, further towards the street, that I'm probably not wanting a bunch of cords and hoses and stuff laying around. And I'm also thinking that if it's behind a house or further away, that there's probably a middle ground here that we can figure out, like, how do we make this safe? How do we make this, not an eyesore, but how do we also make it easy at the same time? So I'd encourage us to continue to explore ways that we can reduce some of those costs. I think the impact fees that Council President Nash mentioned are great. But also, if we're looking at this required permanent electrical, water and sewer, like, where's our line? Like, if there's a hose faucet that comes up 20 feet away and it's in somebody's backyard and they can run something from there, like, is that good enough for us to feel safe? Versus a hose that's, 100 foot long, coming from the house, things along those lines. So I appreciate that you're evaluating that. And Madam Mayor, one more question. I know that we only had 6 pilot projects. I think I was maybe a little bit surprised, and I'm interested to see people taking advantage of this that have larger lots that are further away from downtown Boise. Because when I think of all the opportunity, all of the really large lot sizes, and where something like this might really fit, further out, or on 5 Mile or Overland or these different types of areas, I would love to understand if there's something preventing that, if there's a reason that we're seeing more of them on the bench and more of them on the north end. I know that's where we see more ADUs sort of interest naturally, but it just seems like there's such a huge opportunity with some of these larger lots further away that might be able to accommodate something like this. So again, something that I would just encourage us to look at. Is there a reason why we don't have more folks doing this further away? Is it, because of the large lot size, it requires more infrastructure, things along those lines, or pavement or driveways or other things that we could kind of look at being flexible with. But again, I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I know this has been a long time in the making, and I think it originally was at a staff initiated efficiency that we found that kind of started coming up with this. I remember there was like a design challenge thinking several years ago.
Yeah, Madam Mayor and Council Member, first of all, thanks very much for that comment. I've got it noted. And so we'll see if we can come back with some more information on that. And yeah, this actually came out of an innovation challenge led by our very own Kyle Patterson that really engaged a cross-departmental group of city staff as well as external stakeholders to really think creatively about how to address housing affordability and accessibility in the city. So yeah, you're right that that's where it's from.
Wonderful. Thank you. And just so that people are very clear where I'm at, all of the things that are listed in the proposed code update are things that I'm supportive of, in addition to encouraging us to find ways to either be flexible or mindful of what is a good fit and where is a good middle ground, not a middle ground. Safety has got to come first, but like, where can we incorporate safety, but also find some flexibility?
Madam Mayor. Yeah, Nikki, thanks so much for this. I'm excited for this program as well. When I take a look at this, I know that those connecting to utilities are really expensive. Electrical is probably $9,000. I mean, you're probably looking at $30,000 that someone would have to invest in for this. So it'd be good to understand those costs, and if there's a way, as Council President Nash and Councilmember Halliburton mentioned, that we can incentivize people to reduce that. One thought is, I believe it was mentioned, there's only one per parcel allowed. And I wonder if we had thought about those large subdivisions, large lot subdivisions, if we'd consider more than one, depending upon the lot size. So that's another way that we could look at I think somebody could look to spread those costs out, I guess maybe 1 or 2 tiny homes, if the lot size and area would support it. Oh, one other thing, sorry. Have we had feedback from the Boise Fire Department on these, and did they have any recommendations for us as well?
Madam Mayor,
Thank you.
Councilmember Corliss, thank you for that comment. I've got it noted here. And yes, the Boise Fire Department has been engaged in all of the conversations around crafting these updates. So one of their big concerns was just making sure that it was clear for firefighters when they're responding to a call that this is an occupied structure. And so really needing to, in terms of the addressing, make sure that it's clear in their systems that this is an occupied structure and they need to treat it as such in case of an emergency. But their other feedback has also been incorporated into what we've been working toward.
Madam Mayor, I support my council's comments here. I'm happy to affirm direction, want to see, would be interested in how we can reduce costs. And I agree with Councilmember Corliss about if we have certain restrictions about setbacks and things like that, then I'm not sure we have to limit the number on a lot if they can oblige to the other requirements. That would make sense to me.
Madam Mayor, Council, I think this might be, I think in the modern zoning code edits that we're doing year one, there is a proposal to restrict the number of ADUs to one. This might be a good opportunity for us to have some parity between what council wants to do with both ADUs and this. So that might be something we consider together and how we evaluate that. And be nice to have conversations with staff about their thinking that goes into that as well. So
Just for clarity, sorry, I missed the first part. Are you proposing we do that after a year to evaluate?
staff has already proposed that we currently don't have a restriction in code on the
Right.
number of ADUs you can do. I think staff is proposing one. My suggestion would be is if we do address the number of tiny homes on wheels that you can have, that we have parity between those. So if council wants to go in a different direction than one, we should discuss ADUs and tiny homes on wheels at the same time.
No, because we're overdue. So you've asked to discuss the ADU number, and that's at a different hearing. So what I would propose is that as you confirmed, we move ahead with this. It would be part of the updates that are all done at the same time. You can continue your ADU limit number conversation when the ADU piece comes back. And then that number would be reflected in the tiny homes on wheel ordinance as well. Sound good? Okay, great.
Great.
Thanks,
Thanks very
Nikki.
much.
Okay, next up we have Melissa Janish with an overview of our streetlights program. This was one of the items that came up. I can't remember who raised it, but came up during council priorities. And so we've asked Melissa to walk through how we update to LEDs and any other elements of the program for your information. Then feel free to ask questions as she goes through.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm Melissa Janish. I am the Deputy City Engineer with the Public Works Engineering Department, and I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you all about the street lighting program and just answer some of the questions that came up during that working session. So yeah, so I'm just gonna keep it pretty short and simple, but just gonna go through kind of the current status of our street lighting program and then talk about where we want to go in the next couple of years. So throughout the city, we're responsible for about 10,000 streetlights, the operation and maintenance of those. A lot of the streetlights went in, kind of around the same time frame. So many of them are getting to their replacement time frame. And so we have structural analysis going on right now, a project to go around and assess, the structural integrity of the poles and see if they're at or nearing the replacement standard, so we can start planning for some of those replacements. There's a lot of different types of poles throughout the city as well. So some of them have different replacement standards depending on if it's metal or wood or things like that as well. And so the replacement of aging poles costs on average about $10,000 per pole. And that just depends on like if it's in a really busy area and needs additional traffic control, or if it needs a new base when it's replaced, or the type of pole that it is. So if we needed to go out and replace all of the poles, all at the same time, it would cost us about $100 million. So that's the amount of assets that we have out there right now. And then new streetlights can cost anywhere between $10,000 to $30,000. And so that's quite a jump, but that's attributed to if there's not electrical already in the area, then you need to, potentially have to bore or bring in electrical from other areas. So it does jump in cost quite a bit, especially in some of our older neighborhoods. The power might run through the back of the lots. And so to bring power out to the front, we're talking about getting easements and boring and, going through already developed areas. And then it can even get up to that $30,000 cost to, if it's in a really high pedestrian or traffic area like downtown. So that's why there's kind of a bigger range there versus, if there's already power and we just need to increase the spacing or something like that to add a new light. So, and then how new street lights are installed, they typically come in with development. So anything like a new commercial building or a like a tenant improvement, like a major tenant improvement or subdivisions are required to install new streetlights. And they're also supposed to follow, the current standards that we have. So the city maintains like a guidance manual that says, about how far the spacing of streetlights should be and, where they should be placed, like at critical points, like intersections or cul-de-sacs and things like this. And this policy was developed in about 2015. So anything that's come in since then, will have a little more consistency. And I think that, is maybe where we're seeing some of the inconsistencies in the areas that aren't quite as well lit or don't have as consistent spacing and lighting. It might be that they were installed prior to the policy manual, or, if they were annexed in from another area, they might, not have had lights or things like that. So there could just be inconsistency in the lighting, or they, might not have lights at all. So we've noticed that, and that I think is where that main question was coming from the work session, was just that inconsistency of lighting across the city. And so then I just wanted to highlight a couple of programs from our budget. So this is not, a comprehensive look at our budget. It's just some of the things that are most pertinent to this conversation. So our budget for new lights is mainly out of the public safety lighting program. And so this is in conjunction with like citizen requests. And so people can request lights, and then we can evaluate them to see if they, are in, if the lighting in that area isn't up to the standards. And then it's also in conjunction with the Boise Police Department. And so if the Boise Police Department requests a light anywhere, we try to prioritize that to allow for them to, to allow for that light to get put in quickly. And so at 60,000, that's about, 10 lights. Sometimes we can be able to do a little bit more or less depending on the location where they're needed. And then we get on average about 10 requests per year. And that's starting around 2015. So that's, some years we get more, some years we get less. But in 2024, we actually had the most we've gotten before at 31 requests. And those were all separate requests. So it's not the same person calling in multiple times. It's all separate requests. So that's quite a few. So, I can kind of see from that request line, seeing the request from the public coming in and the need maybe. So, and then for pole replacement budgets, so back to related to the, inspections that are being conducted, the budget is annually about $100,000 for pole replacements. So that equates to about, 10 pole replacements a year for those aging poles. And then for general maintenance, that can be from anything from just like simple blown fuse to needing to replace the light fixture. And so that's funded at about $300,000 a year. And with the aging infrastructure, that cost is expected to kind of increase with the streetlights getting older and things like that. So, it can range from just like maybe $150 to fix something that's, just simple, or up to $2,000 to replace a fixture. And then power is a significant chunk of the budget. And so, which makes sense, but it's at $630,000. So that's kind of the general overview of the budget. And then for where we want to go next, to answer some more of these questions that came up during that work session. So, what we've got now kind of answers how many we've got now, but how many more we need to potentially address insufficient lighting could be addressed through conducting a streetlight master planning effort. And so this would really allow us to be able to see, first of all, define what qualifies as underserved. So, is underserved just that it doesn't meet the current standards, or to what level is underserved? Does underserved, mean that it's not, continuous lighting, or in what areas do we want to prioritize lighting, against the wildland urban interface? Maybe it's going to be a little bit dimmer, moving towards the core, it could be brighter. So just identifying that criteria and what we kind of want to see as a city for our lighting infrastructure. And so then once we'd be able to establish that criteria, then we would be able to identify those areas, assess, make a map of where the areas are underserved, and then we could set some priorities for improving street lighting in those areas as needed, and just make a plan to be able to efficiently use any budget for new lights and things like that. And then it would also really give us a consistent lighting roadmap too. So just like I was talking about, if there are areas that would want to be dimmer, or certain types of lights in certain areas, it would make it easier for when new development comes through to be able to say, this area gets, these type of lights and this brightness, and maybe in more rural areas, it would be, a different type of light or things like that. So it would give us a really consistent roadmap for the future of our street lighting systems. And then it would also be able to identify some potential funding sources to help maintain our current asset, as well as, continue to improve it for the years to come. And so in our budget build this year, we have asked for $200,000 in funding to conduct a street lighting master plan, to be able to really let us start planning for the future and, start making some improvements to our lighting system. So happy to stand for any questions. And then my contact info is on there if you want to, reach out with any questions if you think of some afterwards.
Madam Mayor,
Thanks.
I just want to speak on behalf of Councilmember Willits and Councilmember Morales, who are not here. But if Councilmember Morales were here, he would be running up and down the dais, just so happy about tiny homes on wheels and streetlight master plan. So fully support streetlight master plan, and want to know how council could be more helpful in this basic public service. I am interested if we've thought about any like sustainability as far as like paying for this. Like, is there any type of agreement we could have with Idaho Power on making sure that our street light, $600,000 a year was probably more than I thought that the power would be for that. So if there's any type of sustainability effort we could look at there, I would be interested in that.
Yeah, and we have switched to LED throughout the city. I forgot to mention that as well. So that is helping kind of keep some of the power costs down as well. And then we do have like a negotiated rate with Idaho Power as well. So it is better than like the standard rate. It's at the government rate. But yeah, I think that would be great to look into, as more opportunities to partner with Idaho Power and work with them as well. So I think there's definitely some opportunities there.
Madam Mayor, sorry, my voice is really scratchy today. First, Melissa, it's great to have you here today. I was commenting to Steve from Public Works recently that we haven't seen a lot of Public Works folks in council recently, and hopefully that's a good thing. There's not a problem going on, but it's great to have you here. Like Council President Nash said, Councilmember Willits and Morales, I think, have both been involved in this issue. And I think one of the reasons why has actually had to do with some traffic fatalities that we've had on some different streets. And I know that we worked with you to get, I think, 2, maybe 3 installed on 5 Mile, Cloverdale. And then we also had a recent traffic fatality on Overland, where we were wondering what the lighting was like in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so supportive of a master planning effort that allows us to both take the citizen feedback, which I think it's so cool that there's a way for a citizen to request a streetlight in their area. I didn't know that a year ago, but also to be proactive in that process. And I guess what I would ask in that master plan, I think that there's an opportunity to, when we're deciding where to do it, and overlay with where we have a lot of serious injuries and fatalities
Mhm.
for walking and biking, because we know that that's a contributing factor. And in our traffic fatality review task force, that's one of the things we look at on a regular basis. When we go to a location, what is the lighting like in these particular areas? And like you said, when we're over on Cloverdale, you know, where something was developed pre-2015, those lights are fewer and further between. And there's also not a lot of crosswalks in that area, so the lighting is really bad. So my request is in that master planning process that we also see if we can't do an overlay with some of our serious injuries and traffic fatalities and work with ACHD to do that. And along with Council President Nash's point about working with Idaho Power, I think that there's maybe an opportunity to work with ACHD as well, or other potential funding sources that we typically think of. You know, we typically think of this as a public works issue, but it's also a traffic safety issue. And potentially there's more grants or more opportunities that may open up if we look at these as both public safety, but also transportation safety at the same time. I think that you answered my question about the budget and how we would pay for the master plan. So thank you for doing that. And I guess one other question at this point right now, is the only way that we're actually putting in new ones driven by citizen outreach, or do we have an existing measure where we are looking for gaps already?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, we mostly do the public safety lighting, so for new lights. And Tom Marshall, who's our street light supervisor, he does have a really good pulse on just the street lighting, you know, throughout the city. And so he has been prioritizing areas for improvements like near schools or near intersections. So, you know, without this master plan, we don't necessarily have like a prioritization list, but I think the priorities that we've picked to this point have been pretty straightforward, you know, just by schools, public buildings, you know, kind of major intersections and things like that. So I think this would really let us get to that next level of having, you know, like a more of a true list of priorities on where we want to spend that money. So
yeah, thank you. I think both having that request component, which I think is great and so important, but that proactive component as well, and those intersections with some of the other issues that we're dealing with makes a whole lot of sense. So thank you for the proposal.
Yeah.
And thank you for hearing some of Council's concerns, Madam Mayor, around this issue, and Director Burgos as well, and where we might be able to work together to create a better opportunity going forward.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next, we've got Heather. Is it Zeitlin or it's Zeitlin, right? The Zeitlin, that's right. From Community Engagement, and Shauna Samuelson from the airport to share with us a new program. Welcome. We don't have either of you here very often. Welcome. This is on the hidden disabilities, and we're calling it the Sunflower Program that CE and the airport have been partnering on.
Getting all the logistics worked out. Madam Mayor,
We've got to yeah, I think just pull it closer to you would be great, Heather.
get a little bit closer. Is
Yeah.
that better? Okay.
I often will just hold that one in my hand.
Oh, okay. Let's see how it works. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and City Council members. My name is Heather Zeitlin. I'm the Community Accessibility Program Manager, and this is Shauna Samuelson. She is the Air Service and Marketing Manager. So we're here today I have the clicker, to give you more information about the hidden disabilities and the Sunflower Program. On this slide, you'll see a white background with a bright green lanyard with yellow sunflowers. And it says, we've joined the Sunflower Hidden Disabilities. So we're going to walk through exactly what hidden disabilities are in our community, more about the Sunflower Program, and how we plan to launch that at the Boise Airport. Can you still hear me? Okay, good. So what is a hidden disability? It's a mental, a neurological, or a physical condition that's not visible to the outside, but it's still going to limit or challenge a person's movements, their senses, or their activities. It's important to note that hidden disabilities can be temporary, they can be situational, and they can be permanent. And individuals with hidden disabilities, they are safeguarded by the ADA and they are entitled to reasonable accommodations. This slide is a dark green slide with a bright yellow sunflower in the middle. You'll see lots of sunflowers in this presentation. And it kind of goes over what hidden disability conditions are. And there's a variety. They could be neurodevelopmental, like ADHD or autism, mental health disorders, anxiety and depression. They could be physical, like arthritis, cognitive, like dementia, some respiratory, like COPD or asthma. People could experience an illness or a recovery, like a hip replacement, or have an ankle injury. They could be rare diseases. They could be sensory processing disorder, or they could also be neurological, like Parkinson's, MS, and epilepsy. So there is a wide range. So specifically, the Sunflower program, it uses a lanyard. We don't have them yet. They're shipping the starter kit. This lanyard is going to let individuals know to discreetly signal that they might need additional assistance. So there's no qualifying list of hidden disabilities. People are going to choose to wear the sunflower to indicate that they might need some additional help, support, or some more time. So the Sunflower program also triggers a simple question for staff. How can I help you? So our city staff, they're going to be trained to focus on the support and understanding of these people's needs. And it's also important to note that lanyards are free to the public, so nobody has to purchase anything. This slide is specific to disabilities in Idaho. So the 2022 census data reported that the prevalence of a disability in Idaho is 14.1%. But then the census also helps communities understand their specific needs by asking additional disability-related questions. That's on this slide. There's 6 of those questions. And the most common represented disability in Idaho is cognitive. So that's at 6.2%. And what does that mean? They have serious difficulty concentrating, remembering, or making decisions. Next is mobility. That's more obvious. But then we have independent living. That's at 5.6%. Not as visible. That would be people that have difficulty doing errands alone. Next is hearing. We have vision. And then lastly, another one that might need some explanation would be self-care at 2.3%. So those folks would have difficulty dressing or bathing. So this data really highlights that our community has a high representation existing of invisible disabilities.
Thanks, Heather. So now that you know a little bit more about the Sunflower program, let's talk about how we plan to pilot it at the airport and within our community this spring. So the Sunflower program has been around for about 10 years. It's widely known within an aviation community, and nearly half of our nonstop destinations that we currently offer at the airport are already participating in this program. So airports like Salt Lake City, Portland, Seattle, and Idaho Falls are already participating. So that means that in reality, we are seeing passengers in the terminal that are wearing these sunflower lanyards already. So it's time that our staff knows how to help them appropriately. So there are 3 key tenets that we will be conveying to staff during training. Well, the first is that sorry, Heather. So all passenger-facing staff will be trained. It's not just the City of Boise employees. And that's because most of the passenger-facing staff are not city employees. They are folks like TSA, the airlines, wheelchair service and concessions partners. And so we need to make sure that they are all trained and ready prior to launch. We will also be, Heather and I will be offering a specific training. We will be providing informational posters in break rooms for the tenants just to help raise awareness and remind their staff that the program is here at the Boise Airport. And then for city staff, we will be offering a training to the community engagement team, as well as adding the sunflower program as part of our iLearns due before spring 2025. So staff, get ready. So there are 3 tenets that we will be including in our training. The first is that some disabilities are hidden and you cannot look at someone and know if they are experiencing something that might be a barrier to travel. The second is that if someone is wearing a sunflower lanyard, it indicates that they have a hidden disability and we should not ignore or judge them. And then the third is, as an employee, the sunflower lanyard should indicate to us that this person needs proactive assistance. So we need to readily assist this person and provide more hands-on assistance, maybe more detailed guidance, or even just more patience. So that's the first half of the program. That's our internal staff. So when we talk about this program outside to the community, we will be doing lots of community outreach, and we're going to target the people who might most benefit from this program. So Heather will be contacting disability advocacy groups, healthcare providers, school districts, senior citizens, communities, and others to make sure that they are aware of this. We will also be using some of our broader communication methods like social media, the city's newsletter, earned media, and community events to be able to talk about the Sunflower program to the more general public. And when we're talking about the program to the public, we're reminding them what a hidden disability is and how it can be a discrete indication that they might require more assistance in the airport. And while we're doing this, we're going to always be tying it back to the City of Boise's commitment to accessibility and inclusion and supporting its vision of a city for everyone. And also an important part of the training will be that outside we're telling passengers that staff are trained and are aware that they need to be more empathetic and inclusive when they provide support. So the last thing is how do people actually receive a sunflower lanyard? Anyone can request a lanyard. They'll be available for pickup at the airport's admin office, as well as at City Hall from the community engagement office. And in addition to those in-person opportunities, we recognize that the airport's catchment area is large, and coming downtown or getting to the airport admin office when we're closed and your flight is about to leave might not be an option for everyone. So we'll be setting up a form that allows people to register to receive a lanyard through the mail, and Heather is going to be fulfilling those. And with that, we can stand for questions.
Madam Mayor, I just want to thank the staff for their work on this. I think it seems like a great program. I'm inspired to hear that so many other cities that we connect to are also in the program. It feels like a natural next step for us to continue to spread accessibility where we can. Thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Yeah, thank you both for your work on this. And I had never heard about this program before. And we know that there are a lot of hidden disabilities with people. And I think it also just shines a light of that as well, as just the recognition that people do have hidden disabilities. So I appreciate this program and appreciate you guys' work on this. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, thank you so much for this. This is really helpful and something useful I can advise to some of my clients that have some cognitive deficits that, they can have this available to them. I wondered if you had any support services available for stressed out dads at the airport, anything like that?
Anyone can request a sunflower lanyard.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, Heather, Shauna, thank you. Just one quick question. You had mentioned some work with some of our disability advocate groups. I'm wondering if our cross-disability task force has been involved in this process so far, or if they plan to engage going forward.
I haven't mentioned it to them yet, but I plan to. We have our next meeting at the end of this month, and I can give them the information. But they definitely have connections within the community. so we can get the word out through their members of their organizations.
Yeah,
So definitely.
wonderful. They're such a great asset, I think, to us here at City Hall. And so engaging with them and spreading that message far and wide, I think is a great place to go. So thank you again.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, the vision that you had to make it the airport experience more accessible, and a little bit easier and less stressful for everybody in our community. Appreciate the presentation. Look forward to knowing that this is launched, and to appreciating the support you're providing residents when I see folks wearing the lanyards and our staff being trained to support them. So thank you very much. And one more item before our executive session. Bree Brush is with us to walk through the project request list for ACHD. Welcome, Bree.
Okay, great. Hello, Bree Brush in the mayor's office. I'm also joined by Tessa Grieger of our mobility and public spaces team and Chrissy Inselman from Ada County Highway District. I won't go too much into detail about the background of the 5-year plan since you heard from ACHD a few weeks ago, but I am going to spend some time with you this afternoon talking about the projects that have been advanced through the 5-year work plan process over the last year or so, review the project list that we have for the upcoming year, share with you the public input we received, and talk through some of our priority projects. Again, won't spend too much time here, but just as a refresher, the annual process to prioritize and program projects is the 5-year work plan process, excuse me. This is how projects get done. And this program is informed by existing plans that ACHD might have, or comp plans, pathway plans, plans that cities have adopted, requests from cities, requests from residents, and of course, development applications or anything that is new and growing that needs support. There's 2 different categories of projects. The first is roads and intersections, and this is how I'm going to break it out later. So I'm going to just share what those are. Now, roads and intersections are those larger scale capital projects. They might be widening or intersection upgrades. And then you have community programs, which is typically a smaller scale. Those would be multi-use path additions, bikeway projects, things like that. Pedestrian hybrid beacons. Okay, talking through the projects that have advanced over the last year. Several of you have already worked really closely on these, so that is really exciting. First, we have 15th, 16th, and Americana. This project is under construction, or I'm sorry, began a concept plan now, will be under construction next year. We also submitted as a city a Bloomberg Asphalt Art Grant to test the effectiveness of art in reinforcing traffic safety. And we'll also have a pedestrian hybrid beacon in this area, newly added. On State and 21st, which is the photo on the right, another pedestrian hybrid beacon project in an area on State Street where there are very limited crossings. A couple more to highlight for you. The Garden Street Bikeway, construction completed on this last year, establishing a really awesome north-south connection for thousands of people on the Boise bench. On the right, very active construction site on 8th Street. These are the CCDC blocks of the 8th Street Protected Bike Lane project. We have the ACHD blocks, Franklin to Union, very high on our request list, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, but they're very complementary. Another couple I'll call out here, the Rose Hill Traffic Safety and Traffic Calming Improvement Projects, adding some bike lane protection and reinforcing the speed limit in this area. And then State Street and Pierce Park, which is under construction now, improving safety, realigning Pierce Park, and widening this section of State Street. A brief mention about how all of this work manifests, and that is being designated as a gold bicycle-friendly community. Many years of work go into this on behalf of ACHD and the city to not just make the bike network available for residents, but to activate it, ensure it is safe, and ensure we're continuously improving what's available for folks. So that is what is reflected here in this, and we're really excited about this. We'll get access to resources to keep improving this network and access to other communities across the country. There's only about 30 that receive the gold designation, and we were one of 2 entities, us and ACHD, to be upgraded to gold level status this year. So that is very exciting. To get into our project list, our projects are informed by what we have invested in as a city: pathways, transit, parks, other activity centers. It's also informed by plans that we've adopted at the neighborhood level, our traffic safety priorities, public input, and areas that are experiencing a lot of development or growth. This map should have been in your packet too, so hopefully you can see it in a little bit more detail that way. To show this list by the numbers and to show you kind of the sheer scale we have that is programmed and not programmed, I put it up here on the screen. The programmed projects are those that have some level of effort toward them, whether it's some preliminary scoping or they're acquiring right-of-way, they are in the queue. And the projects that are not programmed are those that are the opposite, have very little work or progress being made, or they're just simply not being advanced at this time. So we have quite a few that are programmed and moving forward, and that is awesome. And then we have quite a few that we still need to continue working through. This year, we added 2 totally new requests and in the roads and intersections category, and then 5 new requests in community programs. So I'll share those in just a moment. To highlight the changes that we made this year, we added some new crossing requests, connections to parks, bikeways, and a couple that I highlighted here on the screen. We elevated RAISE grant projects. ACHD received a RAISE planning grant 2 years ago for a batch of projects on the bench. And now that those have been planned, they're ready to be prioritized for construction. So we move them up in our list accordingly. We also revised project descriptions and changed limits if we wanted to break a certain segment out of a larger project so that it can move faster. You'll see that represented as well. And then we also added priority projects that we heard about from the public through the public input process. ACHD received 404 comments from the Boise area, and they are kind enough to share all of those in detail with us so that we can use it to inform our list. And a lot of the comments we received were projects that were already programmed either by us because they were on our priority list or that ACHD had already prioritized through one of their neighborhood plans. We received the most comments on Warm Springs and Millbrook, and then quite a few on Linden, Warm Springs, and Eckert as well, of course, was even coming up as a priority before the recent events. Our top projects in the roads and intersection category, or roads and intersection categories that are programmed, that is already have some work done toward it, reflect State Street being a huge priority and continuing to be a huge priority for the city, as well as advancing the Eckert Road Bridge, which already had some level of concept work done prior to the deficient report on the bridge last month. Then, of course, of interest to several of you is the 5-mile overpass from Overland to Franklin, widening that facility and adding bike and pedestrian facilities where none are today. On the not programmed side, that is not much work or progress being made at this time. We have State Street and Willow Lane, which has an asterisk next to it to show a new request, but it was part of a larger segment, and we broke it out to reflect the need in this area to support rapid development. And as you can see here, we have several concerning deficiencies that we really want to work on. So we're working closely with ACHE to identify opportunities to move that forward a little bit quicker. Also necessitated by development is number 4 on this list, State Street and Ulmer. You can see State Street is a big theme for kind of our priorities as a city as a whole. And again, another thing we hope to move forward through development, but you can see that reflected here too. On the community program side, as I already mentioned, 15th, 16th, and Americana. Excited to see that one to continue moving forward. Collister from State to Hill, Northview, Ustick, Shamrock to Milwaukee bikeways, and then finally the Emerald Overpass. The city and ACHD partnered 2 years ago on a strategic initiatives grant to ITD for the Emerald Overpass, And although we were unsuccessful, we're committed to continuing to move this project forward so we can improve those facilities. On the not programmed side for community programs, we have Orchard Street being our top priority. There's a photo of it here on the screen. Every year, we consistently hear from residents about Orchard and the challenges it has that are unique, being disconnected sidewalks, many access points, a lot of driveways, but also a lot of people trying to bike and walk on the corridor, presenting a really unsafe situation. So we're hoping to continue spotlighting that as a priority for us. Number 3, Gary Lane and Toby Street, another new request that came up through a lot of resident outreach, actually several comments directly to the mayor's office and to Parks and Rec after the opening of Primrose Park, and comments from residents saying that a crossing is really needed here. So we're going to work on that and ensure that we can get that to enhance people's access to the park. Similar to number 5 on Milwaukee, Goddard to Pembroke. This is near the new Goddard Linear Park and Spalding Ranch. So access to that becomes really important, and we have that reflected on our priority list. Next steps, to best utilize your feedback, I would love to have it by the end of next week. You can share any project additions or revisions or adjustments to the rankings based on any constituent feedback you've had, and we'll try our best to incorporate those based on the information we have available. And the list will be due to ACHD on March 19th. Then they will do their prioritization process, and we'll see a draft 5-year plan released in July when we have another opportunity for feedback and say, okay, that doesn't look quite right, or maybe we want to shift things around, and they do the best they can to accommodate us. So those are the next few steps, and I think that is all I have. I'll stand for questions.
Madam Mayor, Bree, can I ask you some unfair questions?
Sure.
I want to know if you had consulted with the governor on any of these proposed projects.
Madam Mayor, council member, that is not a typical process.
Well, I understand a bill advanced in the House today that would have a gubernatorial appointment to ACHD, so it seems like we should have the governor weigh in on sidewalks in our neighborhoods. Do you have any?
Madam Mayor, Council President, I work very closely with the staff at ACHD and their leadership to represent your priorities.
Okay. Another thing, it's my understanding that there's some bills in the Senate right now that would restrict ACHD's ability to do anything that is not benefiting a car, and that there may even be a legal analysis that says even installing a stop sign may reduce a level of service for a car that might not be legal anymore. I'm concerned about the types of projects that I've seen on here that I think would be illegal, like especially the community programs. I mean, how can we prevent deaths of folks on Americana and 15th and 16th if ACHD does not have the legal ability to fund the type of improvements that would improve safety in those places?
Madam Mayor, Council President, our project list reflects what is actually possible in Boise, which a lot of times is not the space to widen and build brand new roads, but to retrofit aging infrastructure with sidewalks and pathways and things that our residents ask for, which is what we hear about when we see the comments and constituent feedback come through.
Madam Mayor, if I could just indulge me for a comment. I find it incredibly frustrating to have to exist in this system, regardless of who politically is working at ACHD, whether they're liberal, conservative, whatever. I've always found it frustrating. I don't think it makes sense that like when people want to know why their street isn't plowed, they call me and I have to explain to them what ACHD is. And that has been frustrating. The idea that we would expand that even more to include a gubernatorial appointment, the governor has no business being involved in whether or not my street gets plowed and whether or not there's a safe sidewalk so my kid can get to school, church, what have you. So, and in these other bills, I think there's this idea that there's some type of political vision that exists for the city or the county that is counter to what the legislature might feel. We are trying to get people safely to where they need to go. whether that's school, church, work, whether that's walking, biking, driving, all of the above. And the more the legislature tries to meddle in this, the more frustrating it is. And the more people will get hurt if the fewer tools that we have to help them get safely and conveniently to where they need to go. So thank you for all your work in spite of all that. And thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Madam Mayor. Yeah, Bree, thank you very much for this. It's quite a process every year to go down through these lists, and there's always more needs than we do have funding for. I just want to highlight a couple of them that I think are really exciting and happy to see on the list, including the 5-mile overpass from Overland to Franklin. It's a really overdue bridge. It's been on there a long time. It's been partially funded, and I'm glad that we're recognizing the need for that out in West Boise. And also to highlight that Emerald overpass. That's such a great connector for people going out to the mall and the business and College of Idaho or CWI, and to have a resource to get back to the city and to the Greenbelt safely. This is going to be a really great addition. And the other thing I wanted to highlight, in a recent city hall meeting, 2 things came up. One was a appreciation for all the work the city and ACHD has done together to create these safe bike lanes to allow our commuters to ride safely, especially in West Boise, and to get through downtown. And of course, looking for more of that. And the other one was another comment on Overland or Orchard Road. I know it's not programmed, but it is comments I continually hear at town halls and meetings too. And I'm glad that at least we have that highlighted on our list. So thank you, Bree.
Madam Mayor, a couple questions. Thanks, Bree. Thanks for the presentation. I know so much work goes into this, not just this year, but year after year after year. Couple of questions on when we get comments from the public. Can you talk about that a little bit more? So I know that some of these are community driven. And I believe they're both community driven by individuals, but also our neighborhood associations. Can you talk to that a little bit more?
Sure, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton. Through the typical 5-year work plan process, ACHD does a ton of outreach, and they share all of the results of that with us. So they're reaching out to neighborhood associations, or we might be on their behalf, posting it on Nextdoor, things like that. And then outside that typical process throughout the year, we might get calls at the desk or emails from residents. And that's really how we hear it. Usually the calls that we get or the emails we get are a more immediate problem, and then we can just work to address that pretty quickly with ACHD, depending on what the issue is. So it just varies, or it could be something that our staff notice if they're out in a park or city facility.
And Madam Mayor, kind of following up on that, I believe that some of these too come from the neighborhood plans that they've developed over the years with city staff. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yes. So the Councilmember Halliburton, so the process to develop neighborhood plans through ACHD is one of their primary means to identify projects within neighborhoods. It's driven by the neighborhoods. There's a lot of individual neighborhood feedback that is incorporated as part of that. And then that's what they pull from to put projects into the plan. And then we also participate in those processes. And then we sit on all of the project teams associated with those. So they do a really good job at keeping that as kind of the primary list to pull from for neighborhoods to ensure geographic equity.
Wonderful, thank you. On 15th and 16th, you've mentioned that there's been a little bit of work done there already. There's also kind of mention of, I think, a larger concept plan that extends from, I believe it's Fort, all the way up to Emerald. Can you just talk about the status there? Have we already done that, or is that still sort of in the works in developing the concept plan?
It is in the work. The concept plan kicked off, although there was already some preliminary work done. So that's what is kind of a little confusing. They were able to immediately go in and do some safety improvements last year, and then do a full concept plan this year in coordination with CCDC and some of the work they have planned in the Shoreline District.
Great. And I think that some of those earlier projects, those were sort of spurred by, I think ACHG calls it like their rapid implementation plan. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. The Rapid Implementation Program is a new program through ACHD's new traffic safety engineering team to address those shorter term solutions that probably don't need a full scope engineer or things like that, just things that they can go out and deploy really quickly. And they're able to do that. They added a digital sign feedback display there, a PHB through that. And so now through their budget process, they have a small budget and a dedicated team to it, which I think will be really beneficial and gives us another project deployment method.
Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate the list that you put together here. I appreciate the little asterisk that you put next to so many of them that are actually driven by either recent issues, recent community feedback, sort of emerging things that we need to address. I agree with Councilmember Corliss that Orchard Street has definitely got to be a large priority. And I think that there's probably all sorts of different tools we should be exploring to get some of that done. It's just like a small business mecca over there, right next to where everybody lives. And so it's a place where people need to be able to get to these small businesses, whether those are their jobs or whether those are places that they're frequenting for their daily needs. And so I'm excited to see that that is still on the list. And I was really excited to see that the elevation of the raised grants is a priority as well. And I guess I would encourage us to elevate those as much as we possibly can. We've got a great use of funds and so much planning that's been done already. We don't always know that there'll be funds like that available in the future. And so using those as quickly as we can and taking advantage of those raised grant programs that we put so much work into makes a lot of sense. And I guess this is the last thing that I would say. I think Council President Nash said so much already that I agree with. But one of the things that I notice is that almost every single one of these projects are driven by community input. Even 15th and 16th, which was something that I pushed really hard for a couple of years ago, was driven by people reaching out to me, a recent fatality that was in that area. And so when we respond in creating these projects, and when ACHD responds creating these projects, all elected officials that are getting input from their community members, we are responding directly to what their asks are. We're doing long-term planning with these neighborhood association plans to make sure that we're building the projects that they want to see, that they are prioritizing. And I guess I would just get really nervous if all of a sudden if we stopped doing that as a council, if we started looking at what our personal projects wanted to be, and our own sort of agendas that we may have. Like, it has to be driven by the community. And so I would just encourage us as council members, when we look at these projects and we look at these priorities, that we continue to make sure that those are driven by the neighborhood needs that we always have done in the past, that we continue doing that going forward. I want to just say thank you to all the work that you do, Tessa, all the work that you do, and listening to our neighbors to help identify these projects. They're the ones who are driving their cars, riding their bikes, walking through their neighborhoods every single day, and us being able to respond to them and to be able to put these priorities forward, I think is just such an amazing opportunity that we get to have here on council.
Well, thank you for the input today, for both ACHD staff that's here, city staff that's done a lot of work, and I'll just urge everybody to get your comments in if you have anything beyond this by Bree's requested date of the 12th next week, so that she can present this to ACHD in time for them to pick it up. Appreciate the time that's been put into gathering community feedback, overlaying this with long-term and long-held strategic plans that we have as a city. I'm looking at pedestrian safety and the traffic safety data that's come out of that committee, and everything else that came together to address both the community project piece, which keeps everybody safe and makes those of us in cars safer as well, when there are ways for everybody in the community to move around, as well as the larger projects that are a long time coming from a budget perspective. So thanks for this work. Look forward to continued conversations and strong partnership with the Highway Department. With that, I'll take a motion for exec.
Madam Mayor, pursuant to Idaho Code Section 74-206(1) L or I move to enter executive session to communicate with the legal counsel to communicate with risk management regarding pending probable claims.
Second.
Clerk. Halliburton.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
Corliss.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
We will be back here for our meeting at 6.